Today, we are going to talk about the most important subject in software engineering, and that is dependency injection. Hello everybody, I am Alex, welcome to my channel. Today, we are going to jump deeper in dependency injection in Spring Boot and learn about the IOC and the components. What is dependency injection? So, dependency injection is a design pattern used to implement inversion of control. That means that when the class A requires a class B, instead of the class A being responsible of creating the class B, you can inject directly the class B inside the class A. I'm going to show you very briefly a design so you can understand better. But before moving to that, a very important concept is the inversion of control. Spring has an IOC container that manages the creation, configuration, and the life cycle of objects, known as beans, which form the backbone of Spring application. These beans are defined within the container and injected into application code when needed. That means that the class A, whenever it needs, is going to get a class B instance. But if the class B instance is needed in another class, let's say the class C, the Spring Boot IOC is going to inject the same instance in the class C also. Why do you use dependency injection? Dependency injections help us to decouple our code, so it makes it easier to manage and test our application. Increases flexibility. You can swap out implementations without changing the dependent classes. And it simplifies the testing. So when you write some tests, it's much easier for you to mock dependencies during unit tests or integration tests. Let me show you a design that might help you understand easier the concept of dependency injection. So I have prepared this design for you in order to simplify a bit the concept of dependency injection. Spring Boot has this inversion of control container, the IOC container. So let's say, for example, that we have these four classes: the book service, the book repository, author service, and author repository. When the book controller needs one of these classes, what we usually do is instantiating a new class, saying that new book service and putting whatever is required in the parameters of the constructor. What you can do in Java is adding these annotations, add component, add service, or add repository, which in reality, service and repository is a wrapper of the component. And by that, Spring will get an instance of the book service, for example, or whatever class you are using, and register that inside the IOC controller. So what it's going to do is like getting this book service and moving that inside the IOC controller. Now, when the book controller is going to require a book service class, IOC controller and Spring Boot is going to provide one, right? What happens now is that the next time that the book controller is going to request a book service class, instead of creating a new instance of the class, Spring Boot is going to provide the same one. So that's it, because the default scope of the injected and registered classes is a singleton one. So it means that the application is going to build one instance and share that across all classes whenever that is requested. For example, if we have it under controller, let's say the author controller, it also requires a book service class. Instead of creating a new class, Spring is going again to share the same one. What we achieve with this methodology is that you decouple the responsibility of creating a new class from the controllers, right? So instead of the author controller or the book controller having the responsibility of creating a new book service or a book repository or whatever class you want, it says to Spring Boot, hey, you know what? I need a book service class. And Spring Boot will check the container and see, okay, yeah, I have a candidate for that class. Here it is. And it's going to provide that to the control or whatever the service is needed, right? So you might have a need for the book service class to use the author service class for some reason. Instead of Spring Boot creating every time, or the class creating every time a new author service, book service will tell to Spring Boot, hey, you know what? I need a author service class to do my work, right? And IOC is going to check the container and see, okay, yeah, I see I have an author service candidate registered, so here it is. I'm putting this note down here. I will explain in another video what the singleton is exactly, but what you need to know right now is that instead of Spring Boot creating a new class every time that another class is asking from one of the registered classes, it's providing the same instance. So if the book controller, the author controller, or the book service is requiring an author service, Spring Boot will create one instance and share across all of the classes, right? So they will say that, okay, I have a dependency on the author service, so please provide an instance of that. Let's jump in the code, and I will show you how we can implement dependency injection in the Spring Boot, which thankfully, it's very, very simple. Let's move in the IDE right now. So we are back into IntelliJ IDEA. We are taking the things from where we left on the last video. So we have our library management tool that we're building. As you can see here, we still have the controller with the endpoints, etc., etc. What we need to do right now is to create a new service, and we can call it book service. And in order for Spring to understand that this is a candidate to be injected in the IOC container, we need to add the annotation service. That's it. Now, instead of me writing everything as we did in the book controller, I'm going just to copy paste things around. And I will edit the class slightly. So we need to remove this get mapping, get posting, request body, put, path variables, request, and delete, and path variable. So that is clear. We have all the methods that we need, right? So now we go back to the controller, and instead of having controller doing all the logic inside here, we will tell you know what? We need a book service, which is going to handle all the logic. And we need to create a constructor for the class. To create a constructor, you just simply say public book controller, parentheses, and curly braces. Now, in order to inject another class, you need to go to the constructor and say, okay, I need a book service. So now we have set for the book controller to Spring Boot, okay, you know what? I have a dependency here. I need a book service. I'm not going to construct to myself. Please provide one. And I will set the provided one to the internal, to the private book service. And it's also a good practice to annotate the controller as auto-wired. So Spring Boot understands that, okay, here I need to inject something. I see it's a book service. Let me check my IOC container that I have one. Yes, I found it. Here is the class. We can see that IntelliJ IDEA is already suggesting to convert this to a final. That's because we are not going to change anything on that going on. And now, instead of working directly with the books, we can say book service, get books. Here, instead of adding, we can say book service, add the book. Instead of having all the update logic inside the update method, we remove all this and we say return book service, update book, ID, and updated book. That's it. And last one for the delete method. Return book service, delete, ID, and that's it. Here is like removing all the logic, the business logic. We injected a dependency. So we said to Spring Boot, okay, you know what? I have dependency on the book service. I'm not going to construct the book service on my own, and I'm not going to handle the logic, the business logic inside the controller. So the business logic right now has been moved to the book service. The book service, similarly with what we had in the controller, it's responsible to get books, to add a new book, to update book with whatever logic it has, and to delete the book. Let's move to Postman right now, and I will show you that in action. Okay, we are back. Before we start working with our service, and we should first start our Spring Boot application, I'd like to show you in Postman how you can create a collection. So by clicking on the new button here, you can select collection. And I will name this collection library management collection. And with the existing request that you already have, or you can add a new one, or here, add a new request, but I will go to the existing one. And here we have the get books endpoint. By doing a command or control S, we can save this one. We can give it a name. So it's like get books, save it. I'm going to delete this one. It's not needed. This one is the one that creates the book. So I'm going to save this one here and name it as create book, update book, and delete. So we have saved now the request and it's easier to reuse, right? So let's go back to the Spring Boot application. Let's start our application. Wait a second until it starts up. And we are ready. Let's go back to Postman. Go back to Postman. And let's try to get books. Okay, the book is empty. Let's try to create a book. Then let's go back and get books. Here it is. We created and we get the book. Let's update the book. We are going to update the title. So this menu title. And we will tell here that, you know what, this is my second title. Here it is. Let's get the books again. It's my second title. It's updated. And now let's try and delete the book. Everything is based on this ID here. And book ID was deleted. When we try to get books again, the array, the list, is empty. Thus, as you can see, the application is working as expected. Let's jump back to IntelliJ. So here's our application running. So you can see that this dependency injection here, it's putting the service and the service is handling all the logic, right? Similarly, we can create a repository. We can do a right click on repository, Java class. We can do the book repository. You need to add the annotation repository. So you give some meaning to the class. So application knows that this is a repository class. In general, repository class are the ones that are handling the data sources. On the next episode, we are going to set up our database and connect to that, and we can store all information there. You don't really need to know a lot about relational databases. I will try to explain everything in a very simple way, and we will do some very basic setup. So for now, I'm leaving the book repository as it is. We are not really going to do anything with that, but I want to show you that if we go back to the service class and we inject in a similar way as we did on the controller, the repository, you can just create a constructor class and inject the repository. IntelliJ is complaining because it's not being used yet. It makes sense. It's also empty, but in a similar way, you can just inject a repository. And for example, if here we had some logic that it's transacting with a database, you can move that logic into the repository. But for all this, we will dive deeper on the next episode. What you need to remember is that you need to add the annotation service or repository on a class. Now, if a class, it's neither of those, so it's not a service or it's not a repository, you can use the annotation component, right? This is doing the exact same thing. It's registering the class in the IOC container. When you have a dependency on an external class, 99% of the cases, it's better to inject that in the constructor. Of course, you can instantiate a new repository class, which is very simple, but just doing like book repository. But this is a bad practice, right? Because in this case, you would not be able to test the class because you will always have this dependency here in the book repository. So you will not be able to mock the methods inside that class. So By using the dependency injection, we will be able to mock whatever this repository is by passing our test implementation. If in the future you need to just swap implementation for the book repository, you just change the class in here, as long as you keep all the rest of the methods as they are. That's it for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel so you get notified when I publish new ones. Thank you very much for watching and see you soon. Bye!